Alright folks, hopefully you checked out the first video in Iredell County with Joel and Shellie exploring Stearns Chapel Cemetery. In this video, we're still in Iredell County, diving into the origins of the Green Street Cemetery.
We can show you the sign up here that our grant funds paid for after we finished doing the GPR survey.
So this was a grant-funded project?
Yes, it was funded by NC Humanities, and we got a $20,000 grant, and we did a lot of stuff with it. The grant funded the actual survey, so bringing out Len Strozier from Omega Mapping. He came out here and actually did the physical survey, and that included the mapping and the GPS coordinates for each burial. And then we used the money to purchase metal bolt markers. Okay. And then we had 2 separate community days where people came in from the community and actually helped us put those markers in the ground. So we were taking his flags out and replacing them with a permanent metal bolt marker. Okay. And then the rest of the funds went towards this sign here, which just gives people a history of the community, and it has the GPS map on it. Yes, yeah. There are 2,224 burials in about 3.38 acres.
My God.
Most of them, the overwhelming majority, are in unmarked graves.
Yes.
There's only 158 graves that actually has a headstone.
And how many people have you been able to connect from the church that we just left?
Several. I don't know a number offhand because, like I said, this would have been a community burying ground. Okay. So everybody here would have been from either that church, the Methodist church, the Baptist church, or the Presbyterian church. So there were several different denominations in this area that would have all been burying in this area.
Yeah.
And what, prior to this project transpiring, was this cemetery that was already kept up and people were constantly
the city
burying people here?
It's the city of the Statesville takes care of this cemetery.
Yeah. Okay.
It was turned over to the city. It was actually purchased in 1885 by 3 African-American men calling themselves the Graveyard Association. Oh, nice. Statesville Graveyard Association. They purchased it from a lady named Mary C. Bell. And so it's not a church-affiliated cemetery. Right. It was purchased for the specific reason of selling plots and maintaining a cemetery.
Okay.
And probably it fills up. I think the last plots get sold probably by about 1939. And after that, the city of Statesville in the early 1960s takes possession of it, and they maintain it today as one of the cemeteries in town that they maintain.
Okay. So people could literally trace their whole genealogy, most likely, if you're from Statesville, right here in the cemetery.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the most important part of this sign that you're going to like for genealogy purposes is on the other side. Again, we have mostly unmarked graves. Wow, so these are the graves of almost 1,500 individuals that we know of who are buried here.
That's amazing.
Again, it started in 1885, but you don't get death certificates until 1913. Right. African Americans very rarely mentioned in the newspaper. There is no such thing as an obituary. They might mention that somebody died, but that's about it. So a lot of those pre-1913 dates, we'll probably never know their names. Wow. But this is as close as we could get to getting a memorial for every person that's buried here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we're still looking. Mm-hmm. I mean, we probably got about 1,490 names, I guess, that we've come up with. And
I've added at least 5 or 6 to this, and that could be why Amanda needs to go to Sir Speedy, because I sent her a new list with 5 or 6 more names on it.
And what's interesting about this is that it says that this list also specifies those who were born prior to 1865, over 400 burials at 18%. And the legend here has it that this asterisk is born enslaved, the cross is marked grave, and then the diamond is a military veteran. And so 18%, 400 burials out here is a lot.
It's more than that. I know it is. Those are the ones that, there's probably more of those that we're never going to know their names than than those who weren't. So that's a low number.
And I'm seeing a lot of Alexander County names. Lackey, there's Watts, down here. So we're seeing where people that whether they're coming from Alexander County or other counties around here, ancestors are buried out here.
You'll also see there's some Houstons in here and there's some Daltons in here. This cemetery was originally called the Union Grove Cemetery. Our earliest document that we have was from 1891, I believe, 1890, somewhere around there. And it's a document where somebody was purchasing 2 plots for him and his wife to be buried here. And it said Union Grove Cemetery. Some of the death certificates say Union Grove Cemetery. To this day, we're not 100% sure why it was called that, but a working theory is that several families from the Union Grove Township in northern Iredell County, which would have contained Daltons and Houstons, possibly came down here following the Civil War looking for work. So we have a feeling that that played a role in the names of some of the people that came here. Again, it's just a working theory, but that's one of the things that we're looking at.
So, and I love this right here, right? So this hopefully identifies a sense of permanency, that it identifies this as the Green Street, of course, cemetery, and locals would of course know what this means, right? But you know, those that are passing through may not necessarily know the significance to it. Is the oldest grave identified out here that's marked?
That's marked, yes. This one's probably going to be the oldest.
And now this group that started this, did it just eventually fizzle out at a certain period of time, or was it sustained over various different generations since 1885?
I think the 3 gentlemen ran it pretty much all their lives. They passed away, and then it was picked up by descendants of theirs. And then once the last plot is sold in 1939, it just sort of ceases to exist as a business because there's nothing to sell here anymore. And then it kind of fell into disrepair, and the African American community went to the city council and asked them to take responsibility of it, take over maintaining it.
That's probably going to be the oldest stone. That's 1886, and the land was purchased in 1885, so that's going to be the oldest stone that we have. We were hoping to find burials, maybe hoping to find stones that had pre-1885 date, because if you do the math, you got 1865, the end of the Civil War, to 1885 when this cemetery was started. Where were people being buried for 20 years?
So we don't know.
We don't know the answer to
in
that.
The county where people were.
Not in the,
the county,
yes. City.
The county were buried at church cemeteries.
Okay, but here in the city proper.
So we were curious to know whether this was being used as a burial ground prior to the official land deed, but we have not been able to prove that.
And maybe that would have kind of helped influence them being able to obtain the land deed because there were already burials.
Yes, and Mary C. Bell sells a lot of property to African Americans. Her and her husband had lots of property in Statesville, and they, prior to 1865, they did not own slaves. We don't see any record of them owning slaves. So we think that she might have been on the abolitionist side of the opinion, because she does sell a lot of property to multiple different African American groups during Reconstruction.
Wow. And so y'all are able to identify the ones who were born prior to 1865 and identified as enslaved cemeteries. You're obviously looking at death certificates and the censuses and placing perhaps maybe last names with known enslavers here.
And the newspaper announcements would also, for some reason, white newspapers were very fixated on old black people. So if they were a very old person, they would come up with, the oldest one I've seen was, she was 116 years old. I don't know if that's true or not, but they were fixated on that. So you saw a lot of those announcements in the paper, which were still helpful for us because we were able to backtrack. If that article was from 1895 and they said that the person was over 100 years old, I might not know when they're born, but I put an asterisk next to their name because I know they were born prior to 1865. So it just depends on what we're using as a source.
Joel, for you, being such a fixture in this work and being, you know, here in the county for such a long period of time, you seeing how these things have been brought to life during your lifetime, do you feel like this right here, as well as the other cemetery, is something that you would have seen?
Well, when I came in 2002, one of the first things I realized was that there were a lot of gaps in African American history. There just had not been a great deal of research done on African American history. As I mentioned, I had books that inventoried these white cemeteries, but I didn't have any books that inventoried the African American cemeteries. So that was a big gap in knowledge. And there really hadn't been that much done on researching the African American communities around here. A lady named Teresa Bailey, or Teresa Turner, Teresa Bailey Turner, and her sister, Phyllis Bailey, had done a lot of research on the early African American schools that was published in the year 2000 in the Iredell County Heritage Book, Volume 2.
Okay.
But other than that, there had not been a lot of research done, and that was why it was important to start inventorying things like this and researching it before the older people in the community died out.
Well, I'm seeing graves all the way up to this street.
Yeah.
And
Those in particular, there's not, you won't find metal bolt markers. Those stones had been moved when Len came through here.
So these aren't.
When Len came through here, he did not find burials associated with the stones.
Okay.
And he also went over the street because we were concerned, this was called High Street at one point.
Okay.
And we were very concerned that the roads might have been paved over.
Right, that's what I was.
But he went on Green Street and Elm Street and confidently said he did not think that there were any burials there. And he also went into the parking lot a little bit more as well. So what we see is the perimeters of the, which made me feel good. I was like, oh, good, we didn't pave over anybody.
Yeah, now here is one of the metal markers.
So this is going to be the farthest
that
one
we
out.
put down to mark each grave.
Okay.
And you said they're flat with the ground so they can be mowed over. Now we also have the GPS coordinates for each grave in here. So you could go back, even if this disappeared, you could go back to the GPS coordinate and still locate this grave.
Right. And this is a person right here, looks like Reverend Martin Marable. Born 1849, died 1917. Which is interesting because we have a lot of Marables. I was actually with a Marable cousin last week in Middle Tennessee.
Oh.
And so Marable is a surname that did come out of North Carolina.
Which is very interesting because it's not a common one in this area.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of Marables in Tennessee, in Middle Tennessee in particular, and they were enslaved at the iron furnaces. So I'm going to send this to my cousin and take a picture, Joe.
And you see, he would have been born into slavery.
And his wife
and
too.
would have been 16 years old when the Civil War ended and he got his freedom.
Yeah, as you all see right here. Born 1849, died 1917, and his wife, Anne A. Marable, October 7th, 1857. She passed September 23rd, 1919. Last name is Marable.
And one of the trustees on the original deed from 1885 of the Colored Graveyard Association was William Pearson, and this is him and his wife.
Oh, wow. So he was, okay, nice.
We partnered with the local chapter of the Statesville NAACP. We partnered with the city of Statesville because it's actually owned by the city of Statesville. But the really big moment was when we got a $20,000 grant from North Carolina Humanities, because at that point we could hire someone to do a GPR survey, and that would identify who was buried here. As I said, prior to that, there were like 147 erected markers, and so you knew there were 147. Well, after the cemetery survey, it goes up to 2,224. So there's a tremendous amount that are in unmarked graves. They were buried with burial shrouds mostly. And then, of course, we found 10 tombstones that were covered up with dirt, which we dug up and erected, and that brought the number of tombstones up to 157.
How many, based on you all's research and people that may come in, and here's another one right here,
Mhm.
because I'm talking. How many people are coming up to the library asking questions about the cemetery or have inquired since this project has been completed about their own family history? You getting a lot of inquiry?
Yes, we have. And what was encouraging about this project was we had local media coverage. We had the Queen City News came out here and did something, Spectrum News came out here and did something, and it hit the Associated Press. And because of that, Len, the gentleman who did the survey, he told me that he was getting so many calls from people from other states saying, hey, I saw what you did in Statesville. Can you come to our church? Can you come to our... So it was a great way not to take credit for all the hard work, which we did a lot of hard work, but it was so great to see other people saying, hey, this is an option. You can do this. You can have somebody come out and give you the answers to your cemetery that you need. So it was very encouraging to see that spread.
Yeah, it basically publicized what a GPR survey is and made people think, well, wait a minute, I go to an old church. I wonder if we should have a GPR survey there to tell us how many people are actually buried here and how far out in each direction our cemetery actually goes. You know, I did a research and I made the statement once, but I think the highest concentration of educated people in Statesville at one time was actually in the African American community, because the people that were living up and down were the principals of the schools, the school teachers, the reverends, the ministers of the churches, and the store owners. So it was all those people were all up and down this area.
Green Street.
Yeah, Green Street and Garfield. If you go right around the corner there is Dr. Holliday, Robert S. Holliday, and his wife's house. He was an African American doctor and the only one in Statesville, and his wife was actually the Jean's school supervisor over the African American county schools in Iredell County.
Wow. So I see we have some veterans here. Do we have any USDT soldiers that are marked here as well?
We have Spanish American War, World War I, and World War II soldiers that are buried here.
There's Murdoch right there, Albert Murdoch, born 1860. You mentioned that name when we were over at the other church.
Yes.
William Kimbrough.
Yeah, Kimbrough.
Yeah, Spanish American War, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said. 3rd Infantry. 3rd NC Infantry. 1st Sergeant.
And there's efforts being made. These tombstones really look good now, but the local chapter, Todd Scott, the president of a local chapter of the NAACP, their members came and got a solution, D2 solution, to clean tombstones. And they cleaned all these tombstones in here. And that's why this looks really good.
That's why they're so shiny and pretty.
Yeah.
And they're planning on working to take the ones that's been broken off and fix them back, repair them, and stand the ones back up, that have been knocked over.
When you all announced these efforts, and people started seeing things changing around here, what was the local involvement with that?
Well, at one point, we had to put down the metal markers. Well, we had to put down 2,224 metal markers. And so in the morning, I was strong. I was going and doing it. By the evening, I was sitting on the ground, scooting like this, because I couldn't get up. But we had a large crowd of African Americans and white volunteers who had come out and were all over this place, driving down those markers and putting them down for us. There was a group. Yeah.
The Lowe's home improvement stores, they have different, I don't remember what they're called. I can get you an official name, but we have a contact there, and they have different groups that do different things for different African American. They have one that's African American, one that's Hispanic, just different stuff that they do in their communities for community service stuff. And their African American group came out here, and the second one we had like over 65 people here from that Lowe's group that was here to do. We got a great picture of everybody, and it was great to see such a diverse crowd. We had older people that were here that couldn't physically do the work, but were still talking to us and engaging with us. And then we had younger people. Todd Scott, he was mentioning the president. He's an awesome guy, and he does a lot of mentoring with the young boys in middle school. He had his middle school boys out here, and I think they worked harder than most of the adults out here. It was so great to see.
They got the energy, right?
Yes, it was great. Now the good thing is we think this tree and that tree that you're looking at,
Witness trees?
we think that they might have been, that they probably were here.
Yeah.
They're very, if not when the cemetery started, they were here very early.
Yeah, this is a huge tree.
Yeah.
Y'all look. This tree is huge.
And the Potter's Field we were telling you about is going to be back in that half acre behind the old funeral home.
Okay.
So there's 6 markers back there, but most of the people that are buried in there, Len got a number of about 50-ish. But again,
around the bend.
Yes, but there's backfill right there from the construction of this building. So once he got up a certain ways, his machine isn't going to see anymore.
Yeah.
So he's like, I have a feeling there's more under there, but his machine couldn't read it.
Yeah, we had heard people that went to Morningside, and Morningside was right in that parking lot up there. It's where the original Morningside School that was being built in 1921 sat. Okay. And it served as an elementary school, a junior high, and a high school. And in around 1962, they built this building that's there now as an annex building for overflow. They put the first, second, and third graders in it. Okay. And then around 1972, it was purchased by a man named Lonnie Davis, who was in the school system, and he converted that building into the Davis Magnum Funeral Home. And he had the school building, which was no longer being used, torn down. But we had been told, I had been told by some of the older ladies that had attended Morningside that there was a cemetery back behind there. And I had been told that that's where they buried the poor people. But when we went back there, we found 6 tombstones. And I said, well, if I've got money for a tombstone, I had money to buy a plot in the cemetery. Why didn't they just buy a plot? But what was happening is that the cemetery sells all the plots, I think, by 39. They don't start Belmont as the African American City Cemetery until 1943. So you've got like a 4-year gap there where they did not have a cemetery. And all 6 of those markers are people who died between 39 and 43. Oh. And that's why they buried them back there. They also knew that that was being used as a cemetery.
So it started as a Potter's Field and then became overflow for this cemetery.
Are there any integrated cemeteries here in Iredell County?
Oakwood. Oakwood is integrated. Oakwood is the largest cemetery in Statesville. It's about 45 acres, and it's beautiful. It started around the 1880s. I think it started 1880s or 90s when Fourth Creek filled up. And for the longest time, it was not integrated. They had to bury here. But now, 21st century, thankfully, we have evolved. And so it's integrated.
Well, I went back through the early city directories and gotten the names of the people that were living up and down Green Street in Garfield. And the city of Statesville has undertaken a project to have that Green Street Garfield area put on the National Registry as a historical region or site. District. And so they are working on that now. Some of the houses are pretty early, but a lot of them were built later, through the years.
Well, I tell you, this is great. This is the second cemetery that we've been to today, and luckily enough, when you're in small town USA, you don't have a far drive. We didn't have to get on the interstate or anything like that. We were able to just mosey right on over here. And so the first cemetery was called
Stearns Temple.
Stearns Temple. And then this is the Green Street Cemetery. Both of them are African American cemeteries. One post-emancipation. This cemetery does have people who were formerly enslaved that we know for sure via you all's research. And I just want to say this is just great research. I'm always amazed by the thoughtfulness of what humanity looks like. And when people say that I do want people to be treated how I would like to be treated, whether it's in life or in death. And that's why projects like this that you all have undertaken, as well as the community as a whole, who said that we want to get our hands dirty as well to do this type of work as it relates to preservation. It's just admirable, you know what I'm saying? And so I greatly appreciate you all for allowing me to tag along today at both sites. Hopefully with this specific interview, but us being by the street, it wasn't too loud for you all. I'll try to edit.
It's nice and quiet back in here.
Edit that, yeah, but it's definitely very nice and quiet here at the cemetery, like it is in most cemeteries.
Yeah.
And so what's next? So you said that, Joel, you said that they're trying to get this identified as a historic district.
Right.
And there's some other things that's happening with the cemetery coming up as it relates to more cleaning of the headstones. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, the NAACP has said that they want to fix the headstones that are broken, and they will continue to make sure that they stay clean.
Okay. Now, is there a website for this cemetery?
There is a QR code on that sign up there that'll take you to the website, the library's portion of the website that I created that has everything to do with this. So it has a list of everybody who's buried here. It has the research report that we constructed after the fact, and it has other additional links and stuff like that. So that QR code will take you there.
Okay. So
And Find a Grave has it. Of course,
Yes.
Green Street is on
Yes.
Find a Grave.
Okay. Cool.
That's it for now. Big shout out to Joel and Shellie, as well as the Iredell County Library. This was an amazing experience. And listen, if you like this type of content, please make sure to subscribe and share. Peace and blessings.